Ever had that moment where you feel like the entire world is waiting for you to prove something? Maybe it's at work, where you're scrambling to show your worth, or in social circles, where you're constantly measuring yourself against others. That weight, the relentless need to validate yourself, can feel exhausting. But what if I told you that this pressure isn't just unnecessary, but completely missing the point? Stoicism, an ancient philosophy practiced by emperors, slaves, and thinkers alike, offers a radical alternative: the freedom to stop proving yourself entirely. Imagine living without that gnawing fear of being judged, without the endless hustle for approval. The Stoics believed that true strength comes from within, not from external validation. They taught that your worth isn't something you earn or demonstrate. It's something you already possess simply by being human. This video isn't just about rejecting the need to prove yourself. It's about unlocking a deeper, quieter confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion. Over the next 25 insights, we'll explore how Stoic wisdom cuts through the noise of expectations and reveals a path to unshakable self-assurance. From Marcus Aurelius' reflections on humility to Epictetus' teachings on control, these principles aren't just philosophical ideas. They're tools for living a life where you're free from the treadmill of proving and performing. If you've ever felt drained by the need to impress or justify yourself, this is your invitation to step off that stage. Let's dive into the first reason and discover why the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to prove anything at all. The Stoics understood something profound that most of us spend our lives overlooking. Your value doesn't hang on what others think of you. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at its peak, wrote in his personal journal, a book we now call Meditations, that the noise of other people's opinions is just that noise. He reminded himself daily that his worth wasn't measured by applause or criticism, but by the quality of his character. Picture this: a man with absolute power who could demand worship, yet he chose to focus instead on his own integrity, his honesty, his discipline. That's the Stoic mindset in action. Here's why this matters. When you tie your self-worth to external validation, you hand over control of your happiness to people who don't even understand your journey. Ever chased praise from a boss who moved the goalposts or felt crushed by a stranger's dismissive comment? Marcus would call that a trap. In one passage he writes, "It never ceases to amaze me. We care more about what others think of us than what we think of ourselves." He's pointing to a universal human folly, the way we let outsiders define our sense of value. But Stoicism offers a way out. Imagine building your self-esteem on something unshakable: your principles, your efforts, your resilience. Marcus didn't need crowds to cheer his decisions. He found confidence in knowing he acted with virtue, even when no one was watching. That's the core of this first reason. Your worth isn't something others grant you. It's not a trophy you earn or a title you're given. It's the quiet knowledge that you're living by your highest standards, regardless of who notices. Think of it like a tree. Does an oak question whether it's tall enough, or a flower worry if it's pretty enough? They grow according to their nature. Stoics argue we're the same. Our job isn't to prove, but to be, fully, authentically. When you internalize that, the need for validation loses its grip. You stop performing and start living, and that's when you discover something liberating. The only approval you ever needed was your own. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-Stoic teacher, had a brutal yet freeing truth to share: some things are up to us and some things are not. He called this the dichotomy of control, a simple but life-changing idea. Your energy is wasted when poured into what you can't command, like the thoughts and opinions of others. Picture him in his cramped classroom in ancient Greece telling students, "You are not your reputation. You are not the gossip whispered about you. You are your choices, your actions, your character." That's the Stoic antidote to the approval trap. Think about the last time you bent over backward to impress someone, maybe a colleague, a critic, or even a stranger on social media. How much of that effort actually shaped their opinion? Chances are very little. Epictetus would say that's because their judgment operates in a realm you can't access. It's like trying to control the weather by shouting at the clouds. The harder you strain to manage perceptions, the more you'll feel like a puppet jerked around by invisible strings. History gives us a striking example in Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. After losing his fortune in a shipwreck, he wandered into a bookstore and stumbled upon the teachings of Socrates. Instead of obsessing over rebuilding his status or reputation, he embraced philosophy and in doing so found a deeper kind of wealth. The people who'd once judged him for his riches now whispered about his eccentricity, but Zeno didn't care. He'd stopped seeing their approval as currency. Here's the irony: the less you chase validation, the more solid you become. A river doesn't stop flowing because a bystander calls it too slow. A mountain doesn't crumble when a traveler complains it's too steep. Stoicism teaches you to stand like that unshaken, not because everyone applauds, but because you know your roots run deep. The moment you stop outsourcing your self-worth to outsiders, you reclaim something precious, the freedom to grow in your own direction at your own pace. This isn't about dismissing feedback or living in denial. It's about recognizing the difference between constructive input and the exhausting game of performance. The Stoics didn't ignore others, they just refused to be enslaved by them. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone speaks badly of you, that's their problem. Your problem is how you react, whether you let it twist your peace into knots. Tranquility starts when you stop mistaking their opinions for your truth. So next time you feel that old urge to prove yourself, ask, is this within my control? If the answer's no, take a page from the Stoics. Plant your feet in what you can govern. Your effort, your integrity, your resilience, let the rest be background noise. After all, why hand the keys to your confidence to someone who doesn't even know the map of your soul? Seneca, the sharpest Stoic critic of human folly, once wrote that envy is like staring at a mountain through a telescope. Everyone else's life appears larger, smoother, more impressive, while yours feels small and jagged in comparison. He called it a sickness of the soul, this habit of measuring your worth against someone else's highlight reel. And if Seneca were alive today, he'd likely point to social media as the ultimate distortion lens. Scroll for 5 minutes, and suddenly your quiet Tuesday night seems inadequate next to someone's curated vacation photos, career wins, or seemingly flawless relationships. But here's what the Stoics knew: comparison doesn't just steal joy, it corrupts your ability to see your own path clearly. Take modern workplaces as an example. How often have you fixated on a colleague's promotion, their flashy project, or the way the boss seems to favor them? That gnawing sense of falling behind, of not being enough. Seneca would recognize it instantly. He watched wealthy Romans torture themselves over who had the bigger villa. The more exotic imports, the louder applause. His advice: stop keeping score. In one of his letters, he puts it bluntly: no one is happier than the person who doesn't care whether they're first or last. That's not resignation, it's liberation. When you stop treating life like a competition, you reclaim the mental space to focus on what actually matters: your growth, your values, your version of enough. History offers a revealing contrast in Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, visited him and asked if he wanted anything, Diogenes simply replied, yes. Stop blocking my sunlight. The crowd gasped, but Diogenes wasn't being rude, he was free. He'd opted out of the comparison game entirely. No envy, no hunger for status, just pure contentment with his choices. The Stoics admired this radical self-sufficiency. It's why Seneca warned, the man who envies others is never at peace with himself. Now apply that to today's digital age. Every like, follower count, or viral moment can feel like a referendum on your value. But here's the paradox: the people you're comparing yourself to are often trapped in the same cycle. That influencer with the perfect life, they're probably agonizing over someone else's bigger brand deal. The co-worker who seems ahead, they might be drowning in imposter syndrome. Comparison is a hall of mirrors. Everyone's reflection looks distorted. The Stoic alternative: cultivate what Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel, a mental fortress built on self-awareness rather than external benchmarks. Picture two gardeners. One obsesses over their neighbor's roses, measuring every bloom against their own. The other tends their soil, learns their plants' rhythms, and finds joy in the process. Which one thrives? Stoicism teaches you to be the second gardener. Your life isn't a performance review against others, it's a private dialogue with your potential. So next time you catch yourself scrolling with that familiar tightness in your chest, remember Seneca's telescope. Put it down. Look instead at your own hands. What have they built? Your own mind. What have you learned? Your own days. How have they been lived with intention? That's where real contentment lies, not in being better than anyone else, but in being wholly, unapologetically yourself. The Stoics didn't reject ambition. They rejected the illusion that someone else's path should define yours. Your journey doesn't need a witness to be worthwhile. It just needs you, present, focused, and finally free from the exhausting arithmetic of comparison. Musonius Rufus, one of the most overlooked Stoic teachers, put it plainly: virtue is not perfected by applause nor weakened by criticism. That's the heart of this fourth reason: the Stoic belief that living with integrity isn't a means to an end, but the end itself. Imagine a musician who plays purely for the love of music, not for the standing ovation. Or a painter who creates not to sell, but because the act of creation fulfills them. That's how the Stoics viewed virtue. It's its own reward, needing no trophy, no audience, no external stamp of approval. This might sound idealistic in a world obsessed with metrics, likes, salaries, titles, follower counts, but think about the last time you did something truly good without anyone watching. Maybe you returned lost money, told an uncomfortable truth, or stood up for someone when it cost you socially. That quiet satisfaction, that's virtue paying its own wages. The Stoics argued this is the only currency that never devalues. External rewards fade, promotions get forgotten, compliments blur, trends shift, but the knowledge that you acted with courage, fairness, or wisdom, that stays. It becomes part of your character's bedrock. History gives us a poignant example in Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who chose death over compromising his principles. When Julius Caesar offered him mercy, a political ploy to showcase his own generosity, Cato refused. He wasn't performing for history books, he was upholding an inner standard no emperor could bend. Critics called it stubborn, even foolish, but Musonius would argue Cato died richer than Caesar because he died free, unbribed by fame or fear. Here's where modern life trips us up. We've been conditioned to expect virtue to be compensated. Work hard, get praised, be kind, receive gratitude, tell the truth, earn respect, but Stoicism strips away that transaction. Justice isn't virtuous because it leads to promotions, it's virtuous because it aligns your soul with what's right. Courage doesn't need a medal to matter, it matters because it honors your humanity. When you internalize this, a subtle shift happens. You stop asking, "What's in it for me?" and start asking, "What kind of person does this make me?" Consider a nurse who cares for a difficult patient with relentless patience. No cameras, no bonuses, just quiet dedication. Or a teacher who stays late to help a struggling student, knowing no one will ever give them an award for it. These aren't small acts, they're living proof of Musonius' teaching that virtue needs no witness. The reward is in the doing, not the aftermath. This doesn't mean Stoics rejected outcomes. They simply refused to chain their self-worth to them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The fruit of this life is a good character and acts for the common good." Notice the wording fruit, not payment. A tree doesn't bear apples to be thanked. It bears them because that's its nature. Stoicism invites you to live like that, not virtuous for credit, but because virtue is who you are. So next time you're tempted to chase validation, ask, if no one ever noticed this act, would it still be worth doing? If the answer's yes, you've touched something rare, the unshakable joy of being aligned with your principles. That's the secret Musonius Rufus handed down, not a path to applause, but a compass pointing inward. Virtue doesn't ask for a spotlight, it shines brightest in the dark. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled the known world, left behind a startling confession in his private journal: fame is ephemeral. What remains of those who were celebrated in their time? Dust and legend, if that. He wasn't being cynical, he was practicing radical clarity. While Rome's elite scrambled for statues and immortal glory, the most powerful man alive saw through the charade. 2,000 years later, his words cut through our modern obsession with viral moments and 15 minutes of fame like a blade through fog. Consider how history actually works, not as a grand parade of remembered names, but as a vast graveyard of forgotten ones. The poets, politicians, and warriors who were household names in their day, most vanish without a trace. Even the ones we do recall are often distorted. Cleopatra wasn't the seductress Hollywood portrays. Socrates never wrote a word. We know him only through Plato's lens. The Stoics called fame a bubble because it's not just fragile, it's fundamentally fictional. Your reputation isn't you. It's just a story others tell, one that warps with each retelling. Modern culture magnifies this illusion. Think of how quickly today's celebrities rise and fade. An influencer tops trending lists for a week, then becomes a trivia question. A groundbreaking scientist wins a Nobel Prize, only to have their acceptance speech drowned out by tomorrow's scandal. Marcus saw this pattern in his own time. Glory is like a torch, bright for a moment, then swallowed by darkness. Yet we still chase it, as if our ancestors' obsession with carving names into pyramids wasn't warning enough. Here's the Stoic twist: they didn't reject achievement, they redefined what makes it meaningful. When Marcus wrote, "Leave behind not what's etched in stone, but what's woven into the lives of others," he pointed to a deeper legacy. The teacher who sparks curiosity in a student, the neighbor whose kindness lifts a stranger's burden, these ripple outward invisibly long after social media metrics reset to zero. Take Zeno's paradox as a metaphor. If you shoot an arrow at fame, it never truly arrives. By the time applause reaches you, the moment's already passed. But integrity, that's present tense. The Stoics measured lives not by volume of applause, but by depth of impact. A Roman artisan making flawless pottery for the joy of craftsmanship understood this better than most senators craving speeches in the forum. So next time you feel the tug of status anxiety, when LinkedIn updates taunt you, or someone else's spotlight feels brighter, remember Marcus holding the reins of an empire while muttering, "This too will end." Not with despair, but liberation. The fleeting nature of recognition isn't a tragedy, it's permission. Permission to stop performing for an audience that'll forget their lines and start living by a code that outlasts marble monuments. Your legacy isn't what's shouted in your lifetime, it's what whispers after you're gone. And that's something no algorithm can quantify. The irony: those who chased eternal glory in Rome have been reduced to museum captions. Meanwhile, Marcus' private meditations, never meant for publication, still guide lives 2 millennia later. The Stoics knew the paradox: the less you cling to being remembered, the more likely you are to truly matter. Not as a name in a textbook, but as a quiet force that shaped the way people live. That's the kind of fame worth contemplating, not how loud your echo, but how deep your imprint. Here's a truth so obvious we often miss it: most of the people you're trying to impress aren't even paying attention. The Stoics called this the illusion of the audience, that exhausting performance we put on for an imaginary crowd. Picture this: you rehearse a conversation in your head, agonize over an outfit, or hold back an idea in a meeting, all because you're convinced someone's judging. But what if that critic exists only in your mind? Seneca nailed it when he wrote, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about the last time you hesitated to speak up in a group. Whose disapproval were you fearing? The colleague who was probably checking their phone, the friend too wrapped up in their own thoughts to notice your pause. The Stoics noticed something profound. We project our insecurities onto others, then bend ourselves to meet expectations that might not even exist. Marcus Aurelius had a blunt reminder for this: you're overestimating how much people think about you. They're too busy thinking about themselves. History offers a darkly comic example in Emperor Nero, who demanded applause for his terrible poetry and chariot races. The crowds cheered not because he was talented, but because they feared his wrath. His audience was a forced illusion, a hollow echo chamber. The Stoics saw through this charade. They realized most praise and blame say more about the giver than the receiver. A compliment might just be flattery. Criticism might reflect someone's bad day. Neither defines you. Now fast forward to modern life. Social media turns this illusion into a hall of mirrors. You craft a post, scrutinize every word, then refresh for likes. But who's really on the other side? Scrollers half asleep on their couch, bots, algorithms. Even in person, studies show we consistently overestimate how much others notice our mistakes. That awkward silence you relive for weeks, the other person likely forgot it in minutes. Epictetus, who taught in a room with no chairs to make students uncomfortable, loved exposing this fallacy. He'd ask, if you stumbled while walking alone in the woods, would you blush? The answer's no, because there's no audience. His point: embarrassment requires witnesses, and most witnesses are figments of our anxiety. The more you chase their approval, the more power you hand to ghosts. Here's the liberating flip side. When you stop performing for phantom critics, you reclaim creativity. Think of children drawing with crayons. They don't second-guess color choices until adults teach them to seek approval. Or artists like Van Gogh, who painted starry skies without waiting for galleries to validate his vision. The Stoics argue that's how we're meant to live, not as actors on a stage, but as humans following an inner compass. Try this experiment today. Before making a decision, what to wear, say, or post, ask, who am I doing this for? If the answer's anyone but yourself, pause. That doesn't mean ignoring others, but recognizing that their imagined judgments are often just echoes of your own doubts. The crowd you fear, most of them are too busy worrying about their own imagined crowds to judge yours. The Stoic remedy isn't indifference, it's discernment. Listen to those who matter, mentors, loved ones, your own conscience, but release the rest. Like a tree shedding dead leaves, you grow stronger when you stop carrying the weight of invisible eyes. The irony: the less you perform, the more authentic you become. And that's when you discover the people worth impressing were never the ones demanding a performance in the first place. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by a cruel master's abuse, could have defined himself by his failures, but he chose a different word: lessons. He taught that stumbling isn't proof of inadequacy, it's data. Imagine a blacksmith's apprentice burning his first sword in the forge. Does he quit or study what went wrong? The Stoics saw life the same way. Every misstep, rejection, or collapse isn't a verdict on your worth, but a whispered clue on how to refine your craft. History remembers Cato the Younger not for his political defeats, but for how he wore them. When Rome's Senate rejected his proposals again and again, he didn't spin into self-doubt. He'd return the next day, same principles, sharper tactics. His contemporaries mocked his stubbornness, but Cato grasped a Stoic secret: failure only stings when you mistake it for a label rather than a lesson. The woodworker doesn't curse a warped board, she learns grain direction. The sailor doesn't fear storms, he studies their patterns. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on resilience show that those who view setbacks as temporary and specific, I failed this task, versus I am a failure, bounce back faster. Epictetus framed it even simpler: the obstacle is the way. A flooded road isn't proof you shouldn't travel, it's an invitation to build a bridge. When Edison's 10,000th light bulb filament fizzled, he didn't see 10,000 failures. He ruled out 10,000 options. That's Stoic reframing in action. Consider the athlete who tears a ligament. The amateur obsesses over lost time, the Stoic contender. They rehab with precision, studying biomechanics they'd ignored while healthy. Failure becomes their unwitting coach. Musonius Rufus, exiled to a barren island, turned his punishment into a classroom teaching philosophy between shoveling rocks. His students traveled further for those gritty lectures than for any cushy Athenian symposium. Hardship honed his message. Here's where we get tangled. Society treats failure like a stain to scrub off. We rebrand bankruptcies, explain away breakups as if our dignity depends on flawless performance. But Stoicism flips that. Think of a pottery master smashing a cracked vase, not in rage, but to reclaim the clay. The flaw wasn't personal, it was information. Next vase, better kneading, slower drying. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck before finding philosophy. Had he clung to his identity as a wealthy merchant, that wreck would have broken him. Instead, he let it unmoor him from old definitions, no longer a merchant. Fine, now a thinker, the ship didn't sink his potential, it sank his baggage. So next time you face a fall, career, creative, personal, ask Epictetus question. What is this here to teach me? Not, what does this say about me? The answer won't just cushion the blow, it'll reveal the hidden path forward. After all, charcoal only becomes a diamond under pressure. The Stoics didn't avoid failure, they mined it for wisdom. And that's why you don't need to prove yourself by never falling, only by how you rise, learn, and reshape the ground beneath you. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that cut straight to the heart of human dissatisfaction. Non est beatus est qui si non putat. He is not happy who does not think himself so. At first glance, it sounds absurdly simple, but unpack those 9 Latin words and you'll find a Stoic bomb waiting to detonate the entire culture of proving yourself through possessions, titles, and status symbols. The key isn't in having enough, it's in realizing you already do. Picture Seneca's Rome, a city drowning in gold-leafed excess, where aristocrats built floating banquet halls to show off while slaves starved in alleyways. Sound familiar? Swap marble villas for McMansions, and you've got our modern obsession with success theater. The endless Instagram flexing of watches, vacations, promotions, it's all the same hunger wearing new masks. Seneca saw through it. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. He wasn't preaching poverty, he was exposing the poverty of always needing the next trophy to feel valid. Here's the twist: Stoicism doesn't reject ambition, it redirects it. Consider 2 neighbors, one constantly upgrading cars to impress strangers at stoplights, the other restoring a vintage bicycle in his garage for the pure joy of craftsmanship. Both are striving, but only one is free. Seneca watched wealthy Romans host feasts with peacock tongues and wine chilled with snow hauled from mountains, yet they still envied the man across the street with slightly taller statues. His conclusion: no amount of wealth will satisfy those who are poor in their own eyes. Modern research backs this. Studies on the hedonic treadmill show that after basic needs are met, more money barely moves the happiness needle. Yet we keep sprinting on that treadmill, convinced the next rung will finally be the one where we've made it. A tech founder burns out chasing unicorn status, only to realize exit money can't buy back lost health or relationships. A lawyer climbs to partner, then stares at the corner office wondering, is this all? Seneca would nod grimly. He'd seen senators end their lives the same way, surrounded by riches but empty inside. The Stoic alternative: define enough on your own terms. When a student asked Musonius Rufus how to be rich, the philosopher pointed to a beggar drinking from a fountain. That man has never worried about losing his cup. It's not about deprivation, it's about liberation from the need to prove your worth through stuff. Diogenes owned a bowl, then threw it away after seeing a child drink from his hands. Extreme, maybe, but his point echoes Seneca's: possessions you can walk away from own you far less than those you cling to for status. Think of the Japanese concept of shogunai, accepting what cannot be changed. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence, not resignation, but recognizing that chasing external validation is like trying to fill a sieve with water. Epictetus, who owned nothing but a clay lamp later stolen, prompting him to buy an even cheaper one, joked that thieves could never take what mattered: his ability to choose his perspective. So next time you feel that itch to upgrade, post, or one-up, ask Seneca's question: what is it you're really after? If the answer is respect, know that true respect comes from character, not commodities. If it's security, remember no fortune is immune to fate. And if it's happiness, well, that was inside you all along. The grand irony: the less you need to prove, the more you discover you already were what you sought. No purchases required. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a truth in his journal so liberating it's almost comical: people will be too busy washing their hair to give you the scrutiny you fear. Picture the Emperor of Rome draped in purple robes, reminding himself that even his subjects who supposedly worshipped him were mostly thinking about their own debts, headaches, and dinner plans. Fast forward 2 millennia and nothing's changed. That co-worker you're convinced noticed your presentation flub. They were mentally rehearsing their grocery list. The stranger at the gym you imagine critiquing your form, they're too busy counting reps to count your mistakes. This isn't just philosophical comfort, it's behavioral science. Researchers call it the spotlight effect, our brain's hilarious overestimation of how much others notice us. In one study, students wore embarrassing t-shirts to class, convinced everyone would stare. Guess what? Fewer than 20% of peers even registered the shirts. Our imagined audience isn't just indifferent, they're fictional. The Stoics knew this centuries before psychology labs proved it. Your inner critic is a terrible director, casting extras who never show up for the scene. Take modern workplaces. You agonize over sending that unprofessional typo in an email, while the recipient's already deleted it to clear inbox clutter. You replay a meeting quip that fell flat. Meanwhile, your boss is stressing over their kid's soccer game, and your colleagues fixated on a pending dental bill. Marcus would chuckle at how we inflate our cameos in other people's mental movies. Even in his era, senators anguished over imperial opinions while the emperor himself was journaling. They'll forget this speech by sunset. Here's where it gets darkly funny. The very people we're performing for are often performing too. That aloof manager you're trying to impress, they're secretly terrified their team sees through them. The perfect influencer you compare yourself to, they're outsourcing their self-worth to follow accounts. It's a theater where everyone's an actor convinced they're the only one without a script. Stoicism's remedy isn't cynicism, it's perspective. When Epictetus said, "If someone calls you a donkey, ignore it unless you actually bray," he wasn't just teaching thick skin. He was highlighting how rarely outside opinions align with reality. Your biggest critics are usually fighting their own invisible battles, projecting insecurities onto you like a shadow puppet show. That snide comment more about their bad day than your worth. So next time anxiety whispers that everyone's watching, remember Marcus' diary entry. Even your most embarrassing moments will be outshone by someone else's tomorrow. Not as cold comfort, but as permission to breathe, to blunder, to exist unpolished. The world isn't judging you, it's too busy rehearsing its own lines in the mirror. And that's the punchline. The audience you feared was never there to begin with. Epictetus once threw a bucket of cold water on our endless chase for approval with one sharp observation: if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless. At first, it sounds counterintuitive. How can looking foolish help you grow? But the deeper truth is this: validation isn't a finish line, it's a treadmill that speeds up the harder you run. Think about the last time you finally got the recognition you craved, maybe a promotion, a compliment, a social media milestone. That rush of satisfaction lasted what? An hour, a day, then the hunger returned, this time fixated on the next benchmark, the next nod of approval. The Stoics recognized this cruel quirk of human psychology. We don't just want praise, we want ever-increasing doses of it. History offers a stark case study in Alexander the Great. After conquering Persia, one of the wealthiest empires on earth, he wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. His generals were baffled. They'd won unimaginable glory, but Alexander had grown addicted not to achievement itself, but to the admiration it brought. Each victory raised the stakes for the next, leaving him perpetually unsatisfied. The Stoics would say he'd fallen into the approval trap, mistaking external validation for actual progress. Modern life magnifies this cycle. Consider the corporate ladder. You land the junior role, then fixate on the manager title. Get that, and suddenly VP looms large. Each rung promises fulfillment, yet delivers only a fleeting high before the next goalpost appears. Or take social media, you hit 100 likes, then 200 feels like the new bare minimum. The algorithm knows this, dangling just enough validation to keep you hooked but never satisfied. Approval operates like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Here's the Stoic refrain: real growth happens when you step off the treadmill. Picture a musician practicing scales alone at midnight. No audience, no applause, just the quiet discipline of getting better. That's Epictetus, content to appear clueless, the willingness to be a beginner, to make mistakes without performative excuses. The chef burning omelets in an empty kitchen eventually masters the flip precisely because no one's watching. Approval demands perfection. Growth requires mess. Psychological studies confirm this. People who tie self-worth to external validation show higher rates of burnout and anxiety. Why? Because their metric for success lies outside their control. Meanwhile, those focused on mastery, learning for its own sake, report deeper satisfaction. The Stoics didn't shun achievement, they redefined it. A runner chasing personal bests enjoys the race more than one obsessed with podium photos. So how do you break the cycle? Start by distinguishing between feedback and validation. Feedback helps you improve. Your report needs clearer data. Validation seeks empty praise. Tell me I'm smart. One's a compass, the other's a craving. Next, embrace the enough moment. After a presentation, instead of scanning faces for approval, ask, did I serve the truth as I know it? That shift from how did I do to what did I contribute is Stoic freedom in action. The irony, the less you chase approval, the more authentic your achievements become. A tree doesn't grow taller by straining for the sky, it grows by sinking roots. Epictetus' seeming paradox holds the key. The willingness to look foolish is proof you're no longer performing, you're evolving. And that's when you discover the only approval that ever mattered was your own. There's a story about Cotto the Younger that captures Stoic confidence perfectly. During a heated Senate debate, his political rivals hurled insults, trying to provoke him into a dramatic rebuttal. Cotto simply stood there silent, unmoved, like a cliff against crashing waves. His allies grew restless, whispering, "Fight back," but his stillness spoke volumes. Later, when asked why he hadn't defended himself, he replied, "I'd rather men question why I stayed silent than why I spoke." That's the essence of this 11th reason. True strength doesn't need a microphone. Compare that to today's culture of self-promotion, where personal brands are carefully curated and achievements are broadcast in real time. LinkedIn bullet points, Instagram stories of gym victories, Detox-style humble brags. We've turned validation seeking into an art form, but the Stoics would argue we've confused noise with substance. When Seneca warned, "The more you profess, the less you possess," he was exposing a paradox. The louder someone declares their greatness, the thinner it often rings. History offers a striking contrast. While modern influencers chase viral moments, consider the Roman general Lucius Quietus, nicknamed the Silent. He never gave speeches or commissioned victory coins, yet his troops followed him fiercely because they'd seen him walk through battlefields barefoot to share their hardships. His leadership wasn't a performance, it was a presence. The Stoics admired this quality, what they called virtue in motion. Not what you claim, but what you consistently do. Here's the psychological truth underneath. Boasting is often insecurity in disguise. Studies show people who overstate their accomplishments tend to have lower self-esteem. They're filling an inner gap with external validation. Cotto didn't need that crutch. His integrity wasn't up for debate because it wasn't performative. Imagine two chefs. One posts glossy photos of every dish with hashtags like #culinarygenius, while the other quietly feeds homeless veterans with leftover kitchen scraps. Which one actually believes in their craft? This isn't about shunning recognition, it's about redefining what deserves it. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." B1, he was cutting through the theater. A tree doesn't announce its growth, it just reaches for the sun. A river doesn't boast about carving canyons, it simply flows. Stoicism teaches that your actions over time become your voice. So next time you're tempted to broadcast your worth, ask Cotto's question, would this still matter if no one knew? The answer separates reputation from character, because in the end, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who, like the Stoics, let their lives speak for them. And that kind of quiet confidence echoes far longer than any applause. Seneca's most piercing work, On the Shortness of Life, contains a passage that feels like a splash of cold water. You're living as if destined to live forever. No thought of your frailty ever enters your head. He wasn't just scolding procrastination, he was exposing the delusion that one day, some future achievement will finally make you feel enough. Think back to the last milestone you chased: the promotion, the degree, the follower count. Remember how your mind immediately scrambled for the next goal the moment you grasped it. That's not ingratitude, it's human nature. The Stoics called it the horizon fallacy, the illusion that fulfillment lies just beyond whatever you're currently chasing. Take modern corporate culture as an example. How many people grind for years to reach that coveted director title, only to realize it comes with longer hours, tighter scrutiny, and the same gnawing question: is this it? Or consider athletes who win championships, then confess in interviews to feeling oddly empty afterward. Seneca observed this in Roman elites who schemed endlessly for political office, only to find the laurel wreath heavier than expected. His brutal diagnosis: men are tight-fisted with their money, yet wasteful with their time, the one thing they should be frugal with. Every minute spent proving yourself to others is a minute stolen from actually living. Here's the twist: it's not that achievements are meaningless, it's that we mistake them for destinations when they're really just mile markers. Imagine boarding a train convinced the next station will be paradise, only to arrive and realize the windows still show the same landscape. The problem isn't the station, it's expecting any external marker to fill an inner void. Studies on the arrival fallacy confirm this: human brains are wired to reset their satisfaction baseline after reaching goals. That's why Olympic silver medalists are often happier than gold medalists. The silver winners fantasize about topping the podium, while gold winners face the anticlimax of what now? Seneca would point to Alexander the Great again, not as a conqueror but as a cautionary tale. After subduing Persia, he allegedly muttered, "There are no more worlds to conquer." But the truth was worse. He'd conquered the external world while neglecting his inner one. Contrast this with Diogenes, who owned nothing but a barrel, yet when Alexander asked if he wanted anything, replied, "Just step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." One man had everything and felt nothing, the other had nothing and felt everything. So how do we break the cycle? Start by interrogating your trophies. That diploma on your wall, does it represent real learning or just credential seeking? That promotion, did it feed your growth or just your ego? Stoicism doesn't say abandon ambition, but anchor it in substance. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The reward of a thing well done is to have done it," he was redirecting us from applause to craftsmanship. A violinist who plays for the love of music enjoys every practice session. The one fixated on standing ovations endures them. Try this experiment. List 3 past achievements you thought would fulfill you. Now ask honestly, how long did the glow last? Days, hours? The pattern reveals the truth. Satisfaction isn't found at the finish line, it's woven into the running. Seneca's remedy: measure your life by what's worthy of your time. Not by how shiny the trophies are, but by how deeply you engaged in the work itself. Because the ultimate reward isn't proving yourself, it's losing yourself in something greater than approval. Marcus Aurelius had a habit that might seem strange at first. He'd close his eyes and imagine rising high above the earth until cities shrank to dots and empires vanished into the landscape. He called it the view from above, and it wasn't just poetic daydreaming. It was a stoic weapon against the ego's endless hunger to prove itself. Picture this: you're stressing over a snide comment from a coworker or obsessing about how your car compares to your neighbor's. Now zoom out, way out. See your office building as a speck in your city as a flicker on the planet, Earth as a pale blue dot in a galaxy among billions. Suddenly, that snarky remark or luxury sedan feels about as significant as a single grain of sand on a beach stretching for light years. The Stoics saw this cosmic perspective as medicine for the soul. When we're tangled in petty competitions, who earned more, who got praised, who has the shinier toys, we're like ants fighting over a crumb, unaware of the vast meadow around us. Ancient Stoic cosmology taught that humans aren't just separate individuals scrabbling for status. We're cells in a living universe, each with a role but none claiming centrality. Think of the way your heart doesn't boast to your lungs about pumping blood. Organs don't keep score, they simply contribute to the whole. That's how Marcus envisioned humanity, not as solo performers auditioning for applause, but as threads in a tapestry so vast we can't even see the pattern. Here's why this matters today. Modern life bombards us with metrics that inflate our sense of self-importance. Follower counts, job titles, retweets, they all whisper the same lie: you are the main character. But step outside on a clear night and look up. Those stars, many are already dead by the time their light reaches us. The Stoics would nod and say, exactly. Your social media feud or envy over a colleague's promotion is unfolding on a cosmic stage where supernovas explode silently in the background. This isn't meant to depress you, it's meant to free you. When you grasp how small and how precious your moment in the universe truly is, the need to prove yourself evaporates like morning fog. Consider the astronauts who have experienced the overview effect. After seeing Earth from space, many return with shattered egos and reshaped priorities. Political borders vanish, personal grudges seem absurd. That's the view from above in action, not as a thought experiment, but as visceral truth. The Stoics achieved this shift without rockets, through sheer mental discipline. Marcus would write about the smoke and dust of human affairs, how even the grandest monuments crumble given enough centuries. The pyramids were ancient history to him, just as skyscrapers will be rubble to future civilizations. So next time you feel that familiar itch to compare or compete, try this. Imagine your life as a single frame in a film reel stretching back to the Big Bang and forward to the death of stars. Does this moment of validation you're chasing even register? The irony is profound. By recognizing your smallness, you tap into a different kind of greatness. Not the kind that shouts for attention, but the quiet assurance of a wave knowing it's part of the ocean. The universe doesn't need you to prove anything. It only asks that you play your part with dignity, then make room for the next act. And in that humility, you'll find a strange relief, the freedom of being just another magnificent speck in the grand design. Epictetus had a razor-sharp way of disarming criticism. When someone tries to insult you by calling you a donkey, don't argue or just check for a tail. If you don't have one, their words say nothing about you but everything about their imagination. This 14th reason cuts to the bone. Judgment isn't a mirror reflecting your worth, it's a window into the judge's soul. The Stoics realized centuries ago what modern psychology confirms. People project their insecurities, biases, and blind spots onto others like a distorted film reel. Someone fixated on accusing others of greed might be wrestling with their own scarcity mindset. The colleague obsessed with labeling people lazy could be compensating for secret shame about their own procrastination. History offers a masterclass in this through the life of Zeno of Citium. When rivals mocked his philosophical teachings as useless mental gymnastics, he didn't counterattack. He observed that farmers don't throw stones at trees that bear no fruit. They simply walk on. The insults revealed his critics' impatience with deep thought, not flaws in his logic. Even better, when Athenian comedians staged plays ridiculing Stoics as emotionless statues, Zeno bought front-row tickets. His amusement unnerved hecklers more than any rebuttal could. Modern life amplifies this dynamic. Think of the last viral cancellation. How often the outrage says more about the mob's unresolved wounds than the target's actions. A fitness influencer shamed for showing off might actually reveal the critic's own body insecurities. A CEO criticized for working too hard could expose the accuser's burnout they've yet to address. Epictetus framed this as emotional algebra. What's shouted at you minus what's true equals what's unresolved in them. The Stoic approach isn't about dismissing all feedback, it's about developing discernment. Picture a chef receiving 2 reviews. One notes the soup needs salt, useful data, while another rants about pathetic attempts at cooking, emotional spillage. Wisdom lies in seasoning the soup while ignoring the tantrum. Marcus Aurelius perfected this as emperor, scribbling in his journal that insults were like rocks thrown into a pond. They only disturbed the water if he let them sink. Here's the liberating flip side. When you stop internalizing judgments, you gain X-ray vision into human nature. That neighbor nitpicking your garden. Maybe they feel powerless at work. The relative mocking your life choices could be regret over paths untaken. This perspective doesn't excuse malice, but it defangs it, transforming critics into unwitting confessors. Like Socrates said, if you want to know someone, watch how they treat their inferiors, not their equals. So next time judgment flies your way, try the Stoic pause. Before reacting, ask, what would accepting this say about me, and what does throwing it say about them? Not with smugness, but curiosity. The truth about you remains yours to define, while their words sketch a self-portrait in invisible ink. And that's the ultimate power move, letting critics reveal themselves while you remain unshaken, like a cliff recording the ocean's fleeting fury in silent stone. Seneca once dropped a truth bomb that still detonates today. Life is long if you know how to use it. At first glance, it sounds optimistic until you realize he's calling out our greatest theft, the years we waste trying to prove ourselves to people who won't remember our names in a decade. Think about the hours sacrificed to crafting perfect social media posts, rehearsing elevator pitches, or fretting over office politics. The Stoics measured wealth not in coins but in attention. What you focus on becomes your life. And nothing bankrupts your days faster than treating them as audition tapes for some imagined jury. History offers a darkly comic example in Emperor Nero, who spent months preparing an elaborate musical performance for the Olympics. His voice was mediocre, his lyre skills worse, but he demanded first place and got it through sheer intimidation. 2,000 years later, what remains? A footnote about a tyrant's vanity, while Seneca's letters on purposeful living still reshape lives. The contrast is stark. One man burned time chasing applause, the other invested it in wisdom that outlasted empires. Modern life turns this waste into an art form. The average person spends 4 years of their life looking at their phone, much of it curating images of success rather than building it. Corporate climbers log 80-hour weeks to impress bosses who will replace them within days of retirement. Even leisure becomes performative. That casual beach photo took 30 takes and a lighting filter. Seneca saw this coming. We're tight-fisted with money but reckless with time, the one resource we can never replenish. Here's where Stoicism flips the script. Mindful living isn't about doing less, but about choosing better. Contrast two students, one studies to genuinely master material, the other crams for top grades to prove intelligence. Both may succeed academically, but only one enriches their mind long-term. Or imagine two gardeners, one grows flowers to post online, the other to savor morning dew on petals. Same activity, radically different relationships with time. The Stoic alternative: treat minutes like rare spices, sprinkle them where they'll truly enhance the dish of your life. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not for publication, but to distill his thoughts. Epictetus taught in a barren room because the lessons mattered more than the dacre. These weren't ascetics rejecting pleasure, they were connoisseurs of meaningful moments. Try this experiment for one day. Track how many minutes you spend performing versus living. That nervous rehearsal before a meeting, performance, the coffee truly tasted on a balcony. Living, the Stoics weren't against achievement, they were against achievement as theater. When Seneca said, "As is a tale, so is life, not how long it is, but how good," he was handing you a sieve to separate gold from gravel in your schedule. The cruel irony: those we strain to impress often don't even notice. That perfectly curated LinkedIn post, half the likes are from bots, the designer outfit worn to dazzle colleagues. They're too busy worrying about their own outfits. Meanwhile, the clock ticks, a non-renewable currency spent on costumes for an audience that's not watching. Stoicism's remedy is urgent simplicity. Prune the performative. Keep what feeds your growth or serves others authentically. 24 hours look vastly different when you're not spending them as down payments on validation. The Roman sun that rose on Seneca's writings set on Nero's empty accolades. Today's sunrise asks, will you spend your light proving you shine, or simply let your actions illuminate the path? Time doesn't care how you use it, but you'll care deeply when there's none left to waste. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, had a brutal yet freeing nickname for the ego, the inner tyrant. He saw it as the voice that constantly whispers, "You must be more, have more, prove more," never satisfied no matter how high you climb. Stoics understood something modern psychology confirms. The need to prove yourself isn't driven by genuine growth, but by an insatiable fiction. The belief that your worth is something to be earned rather than something you inherently possess. Take modern workplace dynamics as an example. That colleague who name-drops clients in every meeting, or the manager who insists on taking credit for team projects, what are they really chasing? Epictetus would say they're feeding a beast that only grows hungrier. The ego thrives on comparison, constructing hierarchies where none exist. Picture two runners. One competes against their personal best, the other obsesses over every racer they pass. Both cross the finish line, but only one enjoys the race. Stoicism teaches that the second runner isn't driven by passion. They're enslaved by ego's illusion that victory means nothing unless someone else loses. Here's how the Stoics fought back. Epictetus prescribed a daily exercise he called the view from the ground, literally lying face down in public to practice indifference to others' opinions. His students would sprawl in marketplaces, enduring stares and laughter. The goal wasn't humiliation, but liberation. By willingly experiencing shame, they exposed ego's greatest fear, being seen as small. Modern equivalents might include sharing an imperfect creative project or admitting ignorance in a meeting. The muscle you strengthen isn't thick skin. It's the quiet certainty that your value doesn't fluctuate with external reactions. Marcus Aurelius took a different tack in his journal, writing, Wipe away the paint and see the thing itself. He was urging himself to strip away ego's gilding. The titles, the status symbols, the performative layers until only the raw material of character remained. Try this today. List 3 traits you admire in others: integrity, curiosity, kindness. Now ask, do these require an audience to cultivate? A violinist doesn't need applause to know they've mastered a sonata. The truth resonates in their bones. Ego demands witnesses, virtue satisfies itself. The Stoic antidote to ego isn't self-abasement but redefinition. When Zeno lost his fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't mourn his vanished social standing. He reinvented himself as a philosopher. His new wealth was wisdom, impossible to sink or steal. Modern parallels abound: the executive who steps down to teach, the influencer who quits social media to craft in private. These aren't failures, they're jailbreaks from ego's endless hunger. Practical exercises to try. First, ego audits. For 1 week, note every action fueled by the need to impress. Coffee ordered to photograph, conversation steered to showcase knowledge. Each recognition weakens ego's grip. Second, deliberate obscurity. Do something meaningful, help a stranger, learn a skill, and tell no one. The joy of unobserved goodness starves the ego while feeding the soul. The paradox: ego collapses when ignored. Like a shadow shrinking in sunlight, the less you chase validation, the more solid your sense of self becomes. Epictetus put it best: you are not your reputation, you are not your possessions, you are not the body you inhabit, you are your choices, your principles, your will. That's the ultimate freedom, to stop performing for an imaginary tribunal and start living by the only verdict that matters, your own. Imagine walking through a forest and seeing a deer suddenly stop mid-stride to worry whether its sprint was impressive enough. Or a sunflower turning its face away from the sun, anxious it hasn't bloomed as brightly as its neighbor. Absurd, right? Yet this is exactly how humans operate, constantly auditing our own existence, demanding receipts for our worth. The Stoics cut through this madness with their cornerstone principle: live according to nature, not nature as in leaves and dirt, but nature as in your fundamental design, to grow, contribute, and exist without apology or justification. Musonius Rufus put it bluntly: just as a fig tree does what a fig tree is meant to do, so too a human flourishes by fulfilling human nature, no fanfare required. There's a quiet genius in this. Watch a river carve canyons. It doesn't stop to announce its progress or seek approval from the rocks. A bee doesn't pollinate flowers to earn employee of the hive status. It simply does what sustains the colony and the ecosystem. Stoicism argues we're no different. Our culture treats worthiness like a tax return document: every achievement, justify every choice, but nature operates on a simpler ledger. Either you're aligned with your purpose or you're not. No performance reviews needed. History offers a striking example in Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a barrel. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, Diogenes plucked a chicken and tossed it into Plato's academy, declaring, "Behold a man." The joke wasn't just cheeky, it exposed how we obsess over distinctions that nature ignores. A lion isn't less worthy because it can't fly, nor an eagle flawed because it can't roar. Yet humans torture ourselves over skills we should have or milestones we haven't hit, as if evolution issued us a checklist. Modern life magnifies this disconnect. Social media turns existence into a never-ending defense case. Exhibit A, my vacation photos proving I'm adventurous. Exhibit B, my gym selfies confirming discipline. Meanwhile, a tree in your backyard grows rings in silence, unconcerned whether you notice its patience through droughts. The Stoics admired this quality in nature, what they called autarkeia, or self-sufficiency. Not isolation, but independence from external validation. A vineyard doesn't need tourists to validate its grapes, they sweeten regardless. Musonius took this further, teaching that humility, true humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. He trained his students to work the land barehanded, not as punishment, but to reconnect with the unpretentious rhythms of growth and decay. Dirt under nails became a reminder: you are part of an order that predates resumes and promotions. A farmer doesn't argue with the seasons to prove his importance, he adapts to them. That's Stoic humility, recognizing your role without inflating or diminishing it. Here's the pivot: living according to nature doesn't mean rejecting ambition. It means distinguishing ambition from posturing. A wolf hunts to feed its pack, not to hang trophies in its den. In the same way, your career pursuits, creative projects, or relationships flourish when they're rooted in genuine purpose rather than performance. The difference is palpable. Compare the exhaustion of networking to impress strangers with the energy of collaborating with true peers. One drains because it's transactional, the other sustains because it's natural. Try this reframe today. When anxiety whispers, "Prove yourself," ask, would a tree or a tiger waste energy on this? Nature's blueprint never includes begging for permission to exist. A storm doesn't apologize for the rain. A mountain doesn't justify its height. You are as much a part of this order as they are. The moment you stop treating your life like a courtroom and start living it like an ecosystem where your worth is assumed, not argued, you'll feel a strange lightness. Not because the work is easier, but because the weight of proving has finally been lifted. Musonius said it best: we are most human when we are most like nature, uncontrived, unhurried, unafraid to simply be. Not because we've earned the right, but because we never needed permission in the first place. The oak outside your window doesn't stress about becoming tree of the year. It stands, it grows, it shelters, and in that quiet fidelity to its nature, it outlives empires. That's your invitation too, not to prove, but to persist. The world may demand receipts, but the universe only asks that you bloom where you're planted. Marcus Aurelius wrote a line in his journal that shatters the modern obsession with personal branding: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. 2,000 years later, that sentence lands like a grenade in our culture of curated identities. Think about it: how many hours have you spent polishing LinkedIn headlines, rehearsing elevator pitches, or filtering your life into Instagram themes? The Stoics would call this a tragic confusion between being and appearing, where we've mistaken the billboard for the building. Consider the absurdity of a peacock practicing its strut in front of a mirror instead of growing its feathers. That's what personal branding often becomes: an endless rehearsal of impressions while neglecting the substance beneath. Marcus, as Emperor of Rome, had every reason to perform. Yet his private writings reveal a man more concerned with his integrity at dawn than his image at noon. He didn't journal to go viral, he wrote to align his actions with his values. The difference is stark. One approach builds a reputation, the other builds a character. History offers a revealing contrast in Nero, who staged elaborate performances to cement his artistic genius persona while Rome smoldered. His legacy, a cautionary tale about the hollowness of manufactured identity. Meanwhile, the Stoic philosopher Agrippinus refused even to defend himself in court when falsely accused, stating, "My life is my defense." No slogan, no spin, just the weight of consistent living. Modern psychology confirms the Stoic warning. Studies show that people who heavily curate their online personas experience higher rates of anxiety and lower self-esteem. Why? Because maintaining a fictionalized version of yourself is exhausting. Every Instagram post becomes a courtroom where you're both defendant and prosecutor. Social media didn't invent this, it just industrialized the ancient human temptation to prioritize perception over reality. The Stoic alternative isn't rejecting visibility, but redefining its purpose. Take Zeno teaching philosophy in the Athenian marketplace. He wasn't crafting a thought leader brand, he was thinking aloud with anyone who cared to listen. Or Epictetus, whose most famous student, Arian, recorded his teachings not as a marketing ploy, but because the words were too vital to lose. Authenticity, in their view, wasn't a tactic. It was the natural result of aligning your inner dialogue with your outer actions. Here's the litmus test. If you vanished tomorrow, would your brand outlive you, or would your impact? A vine doesn't strain to look productive. It simply bears fruit when nourished. The Stoics urged the same focus, not on managing impressions, but on cultivating virtues that inevitably manifest. A farmer doesn't brand his apples, their quality speaks for itself. Try this exercise for 1 week. Document your day not for posting, but for reviewing. Did your actions match your ideals? Where did you perform versus where did you grow? The gap reveals where you're investing in mirages over substance. Marcus' solution was radical simplicity. Stop describing the person you want to be and start being them in the next small choice. No fanfare, no metrics, just the quiet accumulation of moments where your hands match your heart. That's how you escape the branding hamster wheel, not by shouting your identity, but by living it so unmistakably that even silence becomes your testimony. The irony, the less you perform, the more indelible your imprint becomes. Because while logos fade and bios update, character leaves marks no algorithm can erase. The Stoics dreamed of a figure they called the sage, a person so grounded in wisdom that external validation held no power over them. Socrates was their archetype, a man who drank hemlock rather than compromise his principles, who faced his executioners not with pleas for mercy, but with a calm discussion about the nature of the soul. Picture him in the Athenian marketplace, barefoot and shabby, unbothered by the laughter of wealthier citizens. While politicians scrambled for applause and poets competed for patrons, Socrates measured his success by a simpler metric, whether his questions led others toward truth. No fanfare, no followers, just the quiet certainty of a life aligned with reason. Now contrast this with today's influencer culture, where visibility often masquerades as virtue. Social media metrics have become the new currency of worth. Likes as standing ovations, follower counts as report cards. A fitness guru films their workout not just to share knowledge, but to harvest praise for their discipline. A CEO live tweets their charity work, turning generosity into content. The Stoics would spot the trap immediately. When validation becomes the fuel, the activity itself warps into performance. Seneca saw it in Roman aristocrats who donated to temples just to hear their names announced. Nothing new under the sun. Historical irony makes the point sharper. Socrates never wrote a book. We know him only because his students preserved his teachings. Meanwhile, how many modern thought leaders churn out content daily, yet leave no real intellectual legacy? The difference isn't output volume, but intention. The sage contributes, the influencer broadcasts. One plants seeds in soil they'll never see bloom. The other arranges cut flowers for instant admiration. But here's where Stoicism surprises us. It doesn't forbid recognition. Marcus Aurelius accepted the burdens of fame because they came with his role. The key was detachment, using his platform without needing it. Compare this to a viral TikTok creator who deletes a post with low engagement, or a writer who abandons a manuscript after one rejection. The sage creates whether the crowd gathers or not, like a night-blooming cereus that opens its petals regardless of witnesses. Epictetus offered a litmus test. If you must kiss the emperor's hand to do good, will you complain about the stench of his perfume? Modernized, if you must use Instagram to spread worthwhile ideas, will you panic when the algorithm shifts? The tool isn't the problem, the dependency is. A vineyard doesn't stop producing grapes when tourists stop visiting. It nourishes the roots regardless. Practical application: audit your motivations. That blog post, are you serving readers or fishing for compliments? That gym session, genuine self-care or fuel for a before and after post? The sage superpower is creating value that outlasts the moment's applause. Diogenes lived in a barrel yet outshone Alexander because his light came from within. Your worth isn't measured in pixels or praise, but in the unobserved moments when you choose integrity over image. The influencers of today will be the trivia questions of tomorrow. The sage, they become the standard. Epictetus, born into slavery and crippled by a cruel master's abuse, could have spent his life dragging the weight of his past, but he chose a different metaphor, life as a river. The universe is change, he taught, and life is but what you deem it. Picture a stream flowing over rocks. It doesn't stop to justify the debris it carried yesterday. It simply moves clear and unburdened. That's the Stoic stance on your history, not a chain to drag, but water under the bridge. The moment you stop seeing your past as something to compensate for or prove wrong, you reclaim the freedom to flow. Consider the modern obsession with origin stories. We dissect childhood wounds, past failures, or former identities as if they're life sentences. A single career misstep becomes a narrative of incompetence. A teenage embarrassment lingers like a tattoo. But the Stoics would ask, does the river apologize for the mud it once carried, or does it simply keep moving, letting the current purify? Marcus Aurelius faced this daily, descendant of emperors, yet he wrote, "You need not remain stained by what's behind you." The present is all you hold. Even emperors get to reinvent themselves. History offers a visceral example in Publilius Syrus, a Syrian slave turned celebrated playwright. His past wasn't erased, it was rendered irrelevant by his present actions. Audiences didn't applaud his chains, they marveled at his words. The Stoics saw time as a series of nows, each moment a chance to choose anew. Your resume, your regrets, even your triumphs aren't exhibits in a trial where you're forever defending or atoning. They're simply weather patterns that passed through. Here's where modern psychology and Stoicism overlap. Research on self-concept clarity shows that people who define themselves by current values rather than past labels report higher resilience. A recovering addict who views themselves as someone who chooses sobriety today fares better than one stuck in "I'm a former addict." Epictetus' river doesn't deny the rocks, it just doesn't let them dictate its course. Try this reframe. Next time shame or pride about your history surfaces, ask, does this serve my flow? Not to erase the past, but to loosen its grip. A musician isn't defined by their first screechy recital. They're defined by the note they play now. That's the smoothness Epictetus promised, not a life without obstacles, but one where you stop turning them into monuments. The irony, the less you argue with your past, the less power it holds. Like water smoothing stones, time softens what we stop resisting. You needn't prove your scars are badges or your stumbles were setups for comebacks. You need only to step into the current clear, fluid, unworried about the mud that once clouded you. The river doesn't justify its journey, it simply moves toward the sea. And so can you. Marcus Aurelius once compared the opinions of others to shadows fleeting, distorted imitations of reality without substance or weight. Think of how a shadow stretches long at dawn, shrinks at noon, then vanishes completely by nightfall. It has no power unless you mistake it for something solid. The Stoic emperor understood this better than most, surrounded by sycophants and critics alike. He wrote in his journal, "What benefit do I gain if this man praises me, but his praise is false?" His voice is no different than the chirping of a bird. Consider the modern parallels, that co-worker who scoffs at your unconventional idea. Their doubt is just a shadow cast by their own fear of risk. The relative who questions your life choices, their skepticism mirrors their unresolved regrets. Even praise can be just as hollow, like the applause of an audience that would cheer just as loudly for someone else tomorrow. Marcus saw through this 2,000 years ago. The echo of others' voices tells you nothing about your own worth, only about the shape of their throats. History offers a vivid example in the Roman poet Horace. When critics accused him of dumbing down literature by writing in everyday Latin instead of elite Greek, he didn't defend himself. he compared his detractors to children scared of their own shadows. Then he kept writing, leaving verses so enduring we still quote them today. Meanwhile, his critics, their names are dust. The Stoic lesson: shadows can't persist without your cooperation. Step away from the wall they're projected on, and they dissolve. Now picture a sunflower turning toward light, not because it's seeking approval, but because that's its nature. Shadows may stretch behind it, but the plant doesn't contort itself to adjust them. That's the invitation here, to stop arranging your life based on the silhouettes others cast onto you. A mountain doesn't apologize for blocking the sun. It simply stands, letting shadows fall where they may. Practical application: next time someone's opinion hooks you, whether flattery or scorn, ask Marcus' question: is this substance or shadow? Not to dismiss all feedback, but to discern what's rooted in truth versus what's just a trick of the light. The coworker's critique about your flawed data. That's substance, address it. Their smirk about your outdated phone. Shadow, let it pass. The irony is profound. The more you ignore shadows, the more visible your own light becomes. Like a candle in a dark room, self-acceptance doesn't need to argue with the darkness. It simply burns, and the shadows retreat on their own. Marcus knew this when he ruled an empire, yet wrote, "The only applause I need is my own conscience whispering well done at day's end." Not because he was arrogant, but because he'd learned to distinguish substance from silhouette. Your turn. Seneca observed a peculiar kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from hard work, but from the endless labor of proving you've worked hard enough. Picture a traveler lugging a suitcase filled with stones, each stone a piece of evidence to show the world they're worthy, successful, admired. The weight isn't in the stones themselves, but in the dread of what might happen if they're ever set down. That's the hidden cost of validation seeking. It's not just the hunger for approval that drains you. It's the crushing fatigue of constantly holding it up for inspection. History gives us a vivid case study in Seneca's own life. As Nero's advisor, he witnessed the imperial court's obsession with displays of wealth, gold-leafed ceilings, imported silks, feasts where exotic delicacies were served just to be wasted. Yet in his letters, he noted how the richest men often seemed the most exhausted, not from managing their estates, but from performing their status. One senator fretted over the placement of his statues in the forum. Another lost sleep worrying his rival's villa had taller columns. Seneca distilled their misery into a razor-sharp truth. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. He wasn't talking about money. He meant poverty of spirit, the gnawing sense that no achievement ever feels enough when it's done for an audience. Modern life magnifies this fatigue tenfold. Consider the entrepreneur grinding 80-hour weeks, not to build something meaningful, but to post #hustle photos that prove their dedication. Or the parent orchestrating picture-perfect family moments for social media, too drained by the performance to enjoy the actual experience. The exhaustion doesn't come from the work itself, but from the double shift of doing while also documenting, creating while also curating. Even leisure becomes labor when it's treated as proof of living your best life. Here's the Stoic reframe: the burden lightens when you stop treating your life like a courtroom exhibit. Imagine a gardener who plants flowers purely for the joy of watching them grow. No before and after photos, no competitions for bloom of the month, just the quiet satisfaction of nurturing life. Contrast that with another gardener who landscapes for neighborhood admiration. Every wilted petal feels like a personal failure, every compliment a necessary fix. One tends a garden, the other tends a reputation. Both might sweat the same amount, but only one carries the weight of constant evaluation. The psychological toll is measurable. Studies link validation seeking to decision fatigue, the mental depletion that comes from endlessly calibrating choices based on perceived judgment. A writer obsessing over whether their manuscript will impress critics often stalls in paralysis. Meanwhile, the writer who creates for the love of storytelling finds flow. The work is the same. The weight of expectation makes all the difference. Seneca's solution wasn't to abandon ambition, but to redirect it inward. Simplify, he urged, not by owning fewer things, but by needing fewer witnesses to your life. When a student asked how to start this process, he told them to spend a week living as if invisible. Eat meals without photographing them. Complete projects without announcing them. Notice where the urge to document arises and ask, who is this really for? The answers surprise. That gym session you nearly skipped feels different when the only accountability is to your future self. That creative idea flourishes when freed from the pressure of instant applause. Practical steps emerge. First, conduct a proof audit. For one day, tally every action fueled by the need to demonstrate worth, from polishing your LinkedIn bio to rehearsing humble brags. Then ask, what would remain if no one were watching? Second, embrace invisible excellence. Master a skill with no intention of showcasing it. Cook intricate dishes just for your palate. Learn guitar chords you'll never perform. The joy is in the doing, not the display. The freedom Seneca promised isn't found in poverty or obscurity, but in disentangling your worth from your visibility. A tree doesn't exhaust itself trying to prove it's a tree. It simply grows, and in that unself-conscious growth, it becomes what it was meant to be. The moment you stop carrying the suitcase of stones, you'll stand taller, not because you've proven your strength, but because you've finally stopped weighing it. Epictetus, who taught philosophy in a simple porch in ancient Greece, had a radical way of reframing existence. He called life the classroom of the gods. Not a stage for performance, not an arena for competition, but a place of relentless, messy learning. Picture this: his students weren't graded on how eloquently they debated Stoic principles, but on how those principles transformed their daily choices. A student might stammer through an argument, yet earn Epictetus praise for showing patience with a rude stranger in the marketplace. Another could recite texts flawlessly, but be challenged for losing temper over a spilled cup of wine. The measure wasn't perfection, it was progress. This flips modern achievement culture on its head. We've been conditioned to treat life like a never-ending exam where every interaction, outfit, and Instagram post gets scored. But what if you approach today like Epictetus' student, not to prove you've mastered the material, but to engage with it authentically? Imagine walking into a work meeting thinking, what can I learn here? Rather than, how can I impress? Or handling a conflict with curiosity, what's this revealing about my triggers? Instead of defensiveness, the classroom mindset doesn't eliminate challenges, it transforms them into assignments tailored for your growth. History offers a quiet hero in Cornelia Africana, a Roman noblewoman who turned her estate into a learning hub. When other elites bragged about jewels, she'd say, "These are my treasures," pointing to her children engaged in philosophical debate. While society expected her to perform aristocratic duties, she prioritized intellectual nourishment, not for accolades, but for the inherent value of expanding minds. The Stoics celebrated this approach because it sidestepped the exhausting calculus of external validation. You don't ask a seedling to justify its growth, you simply water it and trust the process. Practical application starts with journal prompts that reroute your focus from proving to progressing. First, what did I learn today that no one will ever praise me for? Maybe you noticed how sunlight filters through your kitchen window in a new way, or finally grasped a subtle nuance in a relationship. Second, where did I struggle today, and what does that struggle teach me about where I need to grow? Not to self-criticize, but to identify the curriculum life's handing you. Third, Epictetus' favorite: if today were my final exam in kindness or courage or patience, how would I grade myself? These aren't metrics to broadcast, they're private check-ins, like a gardener noting which plants need extra care. The magic of this mindset, it turns failure into fieldwork. A chef who burns a dish isn't a disgrace, they've just uncovered a lesson about oven temperatures. A writer with a rejected manuscript hasn't proven their inadequacy. They've been assigned a masterclass in resilience. Even social media, that breeding ground for performative anxiety, becomes less toxic when you scroll thinking, "What can I take from this?" rather than "How do I measure up?" Try an experiment this week. Carry a learning log alongside your to-do list. Jot down moments of insight, however small, the way a difficult coworker revealed your patience threshold, or how losing your keys taught you about mindfulness. Over time, you'll notice something profound. The pressure to prove yourself fades because you're too busy evolving. The classroom doesn't care if you're the smartest in the room. It cares that you're present, engaged, and willing to grow. And that's the ultimate freedom, to stop performing for phantom judges and start learning from every moment life places before you. Death is the ultimate referee, blowing the whistle on every game of status and validation we've ever played. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet slept on a military cot, kept this truth at the forefront of his mind. You could leave life right now, not as morbid fixation, but as liberation, a reminder that the applause you chase today will be as forgotten as last season's fashion by the time the dirt settles on your coffin. The Stoics practiced memento mori, not to dwell on darkness, but to dissolve the illusions that make us waste our fleeting days performing for crowds that won't even remember our names. Consider the ancient Egyptian pharaohs who stacked pyramids to ensure their immortality. Today, we mock their vanity while engraving our own digital monuments, LinkedIn legacies, Instagram shrines, carefully curated obituaries of accomplishment. But death treats all proof equally. The billionaire's net worth and the street musician's last melody both vaporize into the same cosmic silence. Seneca framed this starkly. Death is the proof that all proofs are temporary. That promotion you're killing yourself to secure, the approval rating you track like a stock price, they're sandcastles at low tide. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics grasped. The death awareness experiments show that when people confront mortality, trivial concerns fade. Participants reminded of their finitude stop caring about luxury brands or social climbing. They prioritize authenticity and connection instead. It's as if death holds up a mirror to our posturing and asks, "Is this really how you want to spend your heartbeat?" History offers a poignant counterpoint in the Roman triumph ritual. Victorious generals paraded through Rome with cheering crowds, slaves whispering in their ears, "Remember, you are mortal." The Stoics adopted this practice privately. Epictetus told students to handle their finest pottery as if it were already broken, not to avoid joy, but to savor it without clinging. Try this today. Hold your phone like it's a relic future archaeologists will find. Your job title something they'll misinterpret. Feel how urgency shifts from proving to being. The memento mori exercise isn't about nihilism, it's about reordering priorities. A dying CEO doesn't wish they'd closed more deals, they regret missing first steps and sunsets. The Stoics would nod knowingly when Marcus wrote, "Stop whatever you're doing and ask, is this necessary?" He wasn't advocating laziness. He was cutting through the theater of busyness we use to drown out life's whisper. This won't last. Practical application first, the last year test. For 1 week, live as if you've been given 12 months to live. Not in reckless abandon, but with ruthless focus. What conversations would you finally have? Which masks would you discard? Second, the obituary edit. Draft your ideal obituary, then strip away every achievement meant to impress strangers. What remains are clues to your unlived life. The grand irony, death, the very thing we fear, becomes the ally that frees us from fear's grip. A musician plays with abandon when the encore is guaranteed to be last. A painter risks bold strokes knowing the gallery closes at dusk. Your mortality isn't a threat, it's the clarifying lens that turns proving into living. As the Japanese poet Issa wrote on his daughter's death, "This dewdrop world slash is but a dewdrop world slash, and yet, fleeting makes it sacred." Not less meaningful, but more. Every unmasked laugh, every uncalculated act of love, every moment not spent performing for ghosts becomes a rebellion against the absurdity of posturing in a universe where stardust is our only heirloom. Marcus was right. You could leave life right now. Will your last thought be, "I wish I'd proven more," or "I'm glad I dared to live"? The hourglass doesn't negotiate. It only asks which question you'll answer with your remaining sand. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean, cupping seawater in your hands and frantically trying to prove it's wet. Absurd, right? Yet this is exactly what we do when we scramble for evidence of our own worth. After 24 Stoic reasons dismantling the need to prove yourself, we arrive at the crystalline truth at the heart of it all. You are enough, not because of what you've achieved, not in spite of what you lack, but simply because you exist. The Stoics didn't just suggest this idea, they built their entire philosophy on it. Like a tree needing no permission to be a tree, or a star burning without asking consent, your worth isn't conditional. It's elemental. Marcus Aurelius captured this in a private midnight reflection. You don't have to turn yourself into anything other than what you are meant to be. Think about the weight that lifts the resumes you won't need to polish like armor, the conversations you'll stop rehearsing like courtroom defenses. History's most profound Stoics, enslaved, exiled, or emperors, all converged on this same liberation. Epictetus, whose broken body could have justified a lifetime of self-doubt, taught that no chain could bind his mind. Seneca, surrounded by Rome's most vicious social climbers, wrote that true wealth is wanting nothing beyond yourself. These weren't platitudes, they were lived realities. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. Studies on baseline self-worth reveal that people who anchor their value internally rather than in achievements or opinions show remarkable resilience. Like a tree with deep roots, they bend in storms but don't break. Contrast this with the exhausting reality of external validation. The high-performing executive who crumbles at minor criticism, or the artist who abandons their craft after a few negative comments. The difference isn't talent or effort, it's the foundation. One stands on solid ground, the other quicksand. Here's where Stoicism transcends philosophy and becomes practical rebellion. Every morning, as you brush your teeth or sip coffee, you have a choice: to walk into the day as a defendant pleading your case, or as a sovereign carrying quiet certainty. It's not about arrogance. Stoics championed humility, but about recognizing that no court has jurisdiction over your inherent dignity. Imagine applying this to daily friction points. That looming job review becomes a conversation, not an inquisition. A social rejection stings but doesn't destabilize. Even failure transforms from indictment to education. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, demonstrated this after losing everything in a shipwreck. Washed ashore in Athens, he didn't beg for pity or scramble to rebuild his merchant status. He sat in a bookseller's stall, read about Socrates, and thought, here's a new way to live. No credentials, no resources, just the unshakable sense that his capacity to think and choose made him valuable. Centuries later, Viktor Frankl would echo this in Nazi concentration camps, observing that even in unimaginable horror, some prisoners retained their humanity by clinging to one truth: you can't take my ability to decide how I respond. Your turn today, when the old urge to prove yourself surfaces, when you feel that familiar tension before speaking in a meeting or posting online. Pause. Hear Marcus whispering, what's left if you strip away the reputation, the possessions, the titles, a human being, and that's enough, not as a consolation prize but as the ultimate freedom. The ocean doesn't justify its wetness, the sun doesn't argue for its light, they simply are, and so are you. This isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. Carry these 25 reasons not as a shield against the world, but as a reminder of what you've known all along. You weren't put here to audition for your own life. You're here to live it. Now breathe deep and step forward, not because you must prove something, but because you finally understand there's nothing left to prove. Picture this: you've been hiking for miles with an overstuffed backpack, shoulders aching under the weight. Inside, rocks labeled "Prove yourself," "Seek approval," "Fear judgment." One by one, we've emptied them over the course of these 25 Stoic reasons, until now, the moment you let the whole pack drop. That's what this journey has been about, the exhilarating lightness of walking through life unburdened by the need to justify your existence. From Marcus Aurelius reminding us that fame is fleeting as morning mist, to Epictetus teaching that criticism reveals more about the critic than the criticized, each insight chips away at the illusion that your worth is something to earn rather than something innate. Think of Zeno, who lost his fortune at sea and discovered true wealth in philosophy, or Musonius Rufus, who proved that virtue needs no witness to shine. These aren't just ancient ideas, they're tools for living with unshakable confidence in a world obsessed with metrics and masks. Here's your invitation. This week, pick one Stoic lesson to embody. Maybe it's Seneca's challenge to live as if invisible, doing something meaningful without documenting it. Or perhaps Epictetus' refusal to argue with insults, treating them like echoes in an empty canyon. Don't aim for perfection, aim for presence. Notice what happens when you stop performing and start being. Does the coffee taste richer when you're not staging it for Instagram? Does the conversation deepen when you're not rehearsing your next clever line? The comments are your agora, the modern-day version of the Stoa Poikile, where thinkers gathered to exchange truths. Tell us which reason resonated most, or share the unexpected freedom you found in dropping just one rock from your pack. Because here's the secret Stoics knew: liberation isn't a solo hike. It's a trail we blaze together, each of us leaving behind unnecessary weight so we can finally stand tall, breathe deep, and walk on lighter, truer, unapologetically ourselves. The world may keep handing you rocks to carry, but now you know the most revolutionary act: to smile and leave them lying where they fall.